This is the Winning Plays podcast on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider for the NBA's winningest franchise.
Winning Plays podcast, back yet again. Chris Forsberg of NBC Sports Boston, back yet again. And Chris, it was 4 minutes away from, I guess, me having to do a huge mea culpa when I said, the Celtics will never lose 3 games this season in a row, last podcast.
Can I call you guys out first? I looked at you and Ryan and absolutely, we should have known as soon as you guys said it, what you guys were as delirious as everybody on the 3-0, like feeling good about this team. And you're like, there's no way this road trip can go bad. Like they could lose all 3, but that would never happen. And then immediately just the worst stretch of the Celtics season, followed by the miraculous finish to preserve some of the good vibes. I'm wondering though, I want to start there because I'm eager because I walked away from that game with mixed emotions.
How could you not?
Right. Well, I mean, again, it's a roller coaster. But on one hand, I really want to celebrate them pulling their head out their ass, which is like an accomplishment for this team, which sometimes hasn't been able to do that. On the other hand, they put themselves in this position by, again, just being kind of absent-minded and showing bad habits. What was your balance? Were you more positive than negative, or were you like me and really conflicted?
Yeah. You have to go more towards the positive at the end of it because I just think it was such a ridiculous comeback. Mm-hmm. And it was like the 6th game, the back-to-back situation, and that's a whole nother thing we can get into, but like to pull that out of their ass at that point of the trip when it looked like they were staring at a 6-hour-long flight home, that would probably have been absolutely miserable.
Miserable. The opposite of that Kyrie flight when Kyrie convinced everyone in 2019 or whatever it was. Right? They fixed everything. Coming home, it would have been trying to repair everything and get everybody back on the same page with Marcus Smart throwing tables and chairs or something.
I'll never forget that. How much of a weight is that? And what was different about the trip? Oh, Kyrie started talking to people. That was the big thing. Kyrie, he tried to be part of the team for
I fell for it. I talked to Al Horford that. I'll never forget that day because Al was glowing. And I don't know if it was just Al felt the same way we did. Oh my God, this guy's actually talking to people. This could actually save our season. And they kind of fooled themselves into believing it. That's all I could think. I kept thinking that on the West Coast too when we were out in San Francisco. That was one of the spots where Kyrie grumped his way through, what his future was going to be. I think Bull Pet had quizzed them in one of those stops along the way.
Yep.
Yeah, and so all these memories were rushing back, and yet you kind of. To bring this conversation full circle, you got to kind of remind yourself sometimes they're in a really good spot, regardless of minor lapses like this. And yet again, this team, I've said it probably 5 or 6 times this year. There are games they've won that they wouldn't have won last year. They wouldn't have won, in any recent year. And so I try not to get too despondent, but I just hold this team to a high level now. And even coming back 4-2, I was yearning for just a little bit more based on, the end of the trip.
I think that's fair. And I think that's if you're putting them on a tier of above everyone else in the NBA, I think they kind of showed on this trip, they're not on that tier. They're in a top tier league, but they haven't separated themselves from the Bucks or maybe the best team in the West, the Nuggets at full strength, whoever you think is, the top of the class out West. And I think that became apparent here. What encouraged me about the comeback and where I give them a little bit of slack, as far as the trip goes is number one, they were due for this. They were due for a couple road duds in the row. They hadn't played like crap in 2 games all year, period, much less 2 games in a row. So this was the time where it was going to happen. We probably should I probably should have seen that coming.
Well, what if I said they would have gone 3-3 on the trip, but they would have smoked Golden State? They did the Golden State what they did to Phoenix.
Yeah.
I think we'd feel better about the trip as a whole, and yet it's weird to say that, right? It is. We really put so much emphasis onto that one game that I probably fixate on that too much. It was from the opening minute, it was so jarring to almost have flashbacks. And it felt like Hauser and Cornette were overwhelmed in the magnitude of that moment, that everybody else was way too tight and they could just never get it. And you could just feel the Warriors were yep, took them down a peg and just kind of reminded them what it takes to be a championship team. And so it doesn't change my out view of what this Celtics season should be. They're still championship contenders. It's just not quite as steamroller of a team that like we had started to build this up to. And obviously, as you said, there's all little caveats. If they had Robb, if Al didn't get COVID again for the millionth time, like there's all these little things. And yet, even without that, I think they could have shown themselves better in those two games.
Fair. And where I guess I look at the Warriors situation, I think about that less because I just look at them right now being like, what are the odds the Warriors are going to get back to the finals right now, period?
I think it's high.
You think it's high?
I really do. Do.
They're like 2-14 on the road.
The West is a mess. Like none of those teams, like when you watch Phoenix, do you say, oh, that's a finals team?
Oh, no. I have no idea who's going to get out. I just think the Warriors odds are 10% right now of getting out of that mess.
I don't know.
Because they're going to play 3 series on the road. Like they're going to
no doubt. And I'm not here, but I just feel like championship teams sort of go through this malaise at times, and like they had their preseason issue and they've been slow to kind of get themselves out of it, and they've got to figure out the Wiseman situation. But you're telling me they trade Wiseman for like one good piece. Yeah. Wiggins comes back, like all of a sudden they're as loaded as anyone in the Western Conference. They've had the pedigree. Steph is like end of the road. I want one more and just keep getting greedy, and Clay figures it out. Like that team scares the hell out of me. And I still think the Celtics are a better team if they were to see them again. But I like, for me, this is going to be Celtics and Warriors part 2 at the end of the season. And I can't convince myself otherwise at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like they do have, there will be trades made there. And when they add some veteran experience to that bench that they need, when guys like DiVincenzo and Jermaine Green, like those guys are obviously have been flops. So maybe they are pulling the 2010 Celtics card where
exactly.
You just you ramp it into gear at the end of the year, you get the middle of the road seed, and then you figure it out later. But
that is dangerous. Like to be fair,
right?
Yeah, like because like there is good teams in the West, and forcing yourself, as you said, to go on the road when you haven't played well on the road at all is a daunting prospect. I just don't. I'm like, no one in the West overwhelms me right now. Like like you said, Denver's great, and like they can bruise you. I mean, that points in the paint the other night was like absurd. But do I think they don't have flaws? Do I think like the Celtics seem to play Denver really well every time they play them? So like no one out West really overwhelms me. It's just I think it's going to come down. A lot of the times it boils down to who's ready for that moment, and maybe Denver's ready now, more ready than they were before, but. I feel
long way to go.
Long way to go. That's my long way of saying like I just braced my mind for Celtics Warriors part 2 since like the start of the season.
But going back to let's go back to the big picture for the trip though, in terms of ups and downs. And I think you laid out the fair credit, that should have been. I mean, the way they blew that game and the manner they blew that game, or the team blew that game against the Lakers, brought up a lot of red flags from years past, skeletons in the closet, if you will. One thing I was encouraged by, again, going back to the end of that game, was a couple things. One, Marcus Smart, playmaking.
Unbelievable.
It was like the perfect amount in the sense of we have the steal that he got on LeBron and Westbrook, obviously a huge play at that point in the game, got the Lakers probably tightening up that point. But then the 3 he made before Tatum hit that's the kind of shots you want Marcus Smart taking in those situations where it's like you need him to take that shot willingly. If LeBron is literally like, okay, go to the side, take that wide open shot, I'd love to give it to you. You have to make teams pay for that, but also not forcing it too much. Like at the other,
and he was forcing it early.
He was.
And so I did this for Post Up yesterday. There was 4 things that really encouraged me about the end of that game. Like I thought Joe just kind of riding it out and challenging his guys as much as we all sit there and scream about timeouts. Like I like that now. Like I think you do. You have to put these guys in tough pitch situations and be like, figure it out. Just figure it out. I like that he put Cornette in there. Like that mic'd up timeout.
Sneaky big move.
Huge. And he had to pull Brogdon at that point. Brogdon wasn't good, and that was part of the reason Smart was out there. I think if Brogdon had been playing better, you maybe ride Brogdon in that case. But White was playing good, and they still went with Smart. Now, I think Smart was 3 of 12, 3 turnovers. He puked in the back at one point. And yet Joe Mazzulla was like, that's the dude I need on the court in the final final 8 minutes. And like, I respect that. Like, you just know in those instances, Smart, for whatever reason, is going to do something ludicrous and gives you the best chance of full-on chaos. And he did. So from, just like you said, the three was huge. I think it was him who drove and kicked to Grant in overtime.
Yep.
The steal, like, they're not like that comeback. It was hard to sell yourself on it until he stole that pass. And then you're like, 3 minutes to go. Okay, this is possible. And it just sort of snowballed from there. And I thought everybody had a hand in it. Like, I mean, Tatum will get all the glory because of that fadeaway, and rightfully so. But yeah, I just thought really as bad as the stretch was that preceded it, everything from the 3.5 minute mark through overtime was great. They like really played and pulled their head out of their butts. So yeah, I think it's completely fair to want to like rally around that. I thought Mazzulla, who, maybe didn't have his best moments against Golden State, and again, I don't know. I never know how much to come down on coaches because like your players are sucking in that instance. But man, he pressed all the right buttons down the stretch, and he deserves a lot of credit for he's got some quirks, and he doesn't seem to care that we care about them. Like, he's just going to ride the timeout thing and chew his bubble gum and be Joe Mazzulla, and that's worked.
It is, but the Cornet tweak again is one of the things, like you haven't been tested. Like, that's the stuff that I feel like separates you in the finals, right? And Ime got into some of that, I feel like, much better in the second half last year, but he hasn't been tested in a lot of those situations where you have to make tough lineup choices in big spots. But that was one where I was like, oh yeah, like what, obviously going small wasn't working, but Blake and Luke hadn't given them anything in that game. But I was like, well, you know what, Luke, that's a big body that can kind of muck things up in the lane. They're killing us in the paint. Let's at least take that away. And it worked. And that's
I love that mic'd up timeout where he's like, okay, guys, so the only thing they can do is score in transition because we cannot stop the basketball. We're gonna put 7'2" dude out there who has Frankenstein arms, and like all of a sudden you're right back in it. So credit, because I do think that's tough. When you've got a Malcolm Brogdon on your team and you want to play him, and he's probably sitting there thinking, why aren't I playing more crunch time minutes? And Derek White, like all these first round guys, and then you go with Luke Cornett, and like that takes a little bit of guts, even if it's obvious from a coaching standpoint. And no, I give him credit. He, again, for me, a lot of that job is pushing the right buttons in the right moments. And I thought there were some unobvious decisions, not so obvious decisions, however I should write that. And he made them, like sticking with Smart, Cornette, like it just all, he did a lot of the right things.
To go back to the negative, like the transition defense during that run, good God. Like, and I wouldn't go back and look. Was a lot of those Jalen where he just didn't get back for a few of those breakout. I mean, I know that's like an old bad hat for him at times, but for that to happen, like I feel like 3 or 4 times in like the span of 10 minutes was just like yikes.
And again, I don't know what the balance is. Like Jalen voiced it afterwards, said it might have been good to get a timeout there and just reaffirm. And I do think that, but I guess I like the balance. Like, you should know that. You shouldn't need a timeout for Joe Mazzulla to tell you, stop letting them attack the basket every time. So I see the balance. And I think what Mazzulla's bigger point overall with that is there's just going to be times, whether it's in the finals or a key moment, where he can't hold your hand. And, part of your growth has to be figuring it out in those situations. I'd rather they do it in November, December than sit there and need that coddling in May and June. So we'll see if it pays dividends. Just like, this team does have a propensity to fall into bad habits. And so try to get them all out of the way now. But just to put a bow on Mazzulla, he's going to coach the All-Star team. That's crazy to me.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, unless they really fall apart on the homestand, but you just can't see that coming. So I think that's fascinating. Can you imagine him like
where is it this year?
It is in Salt Lake. So Danny Ainge can come visit his old buddy and give him say hello. Yeah, it's wild. It's the Celtics will have probably their 2 guys, but Mazzulla, and who knows, because I don't even know what the format is. Are they still drafting teams and stupid?
Yeah, they're drafting their captains.
So there's a chance he might not even coach Jalen and Jason, right?
Yeah, yeah. The real chance that won't happen.
Yeah, it's like. So
I imagine you had already booked your trip to Salt Lake City for the middle of February.
As much as I love Salt Lake City, I will be in South Carolina for the All-Star break. So I will need a vacation at that point.
All right.
But, all right. What was your one other big question?
So we're recording this on Thursday, December 15th, the quote unquote unofficial start of NBA trade season.
Ooh.
Did we learn anything in terms of Celtics needs or non-needs from this trip when you're facing, and with the caveats that they're down some bodies, but I think there were maybe some liabilities, some weaknesses that kind of reemerged or didn't reemerge over the course. Like, did anything kind of stick out to you on that front as you watch these 6 games?
Do you want to just at Sam Hauser when you're talking like that?
No, I mean, come on. No, I'm Sam H.
Like obviously the little bit of a downturn in the bench production is slightly concerning. I'm not going to make a big deal of it. I've had a lot of people say to me like, "Oh, what happens if Hauser turns into a pumpkin?" I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be a little streaky at times, and he's going to ride the roller coaster. He's definitely got to get better in bigger moments. Like, he's got to be, and that's not fair because everyone's just got to kind of navigate that. The guy barely saw the floor in the finals except trash time. Now we're asking him to go into Golden State in the biggest game of the year and make shots. And so I'm not gonna overreact. I think he's still been very good. The numbers haven't come like completely crashing down. But if you're telling me like, do you think they need another wing? I think we've been pretty consistent with that. I think you will look at that as the trade deadline comes. I don't necessarily think there's anyone. I'm still not at a point yet where I'm like, I can see this team spending legitimate assets to add someone based on like right now. Like, if they had another injury, maybe, but like, I still think, I don't know who they're getting that necessarily slots ahead of anybody that's already on your roster. But, the buyout market is the one that I think will end up dictating, is there someone out there you can pay a little bit more with that Gallo injury exception? But I would say based on the trip, as long as Robb and Al, like as long as Robb comes back and is just steadily progressing and doesn't have any setbacks, and as long as Al doesn't catch COVID 4 more times, then I'm confident that you have enough depth to sort of navigate, especially, I'm pretty confident about that because Luke's not going to play a lot and yet is still a serviceable big man and probably better than anything you could get on the market. So yeah, I would say I'm still pretty confident in what they've got.
Fair.
You feeling that way?
No, I kind of lean towards the other way of Hauser right now in terms of I think he's opening the door, and he's shooting 27% from 3 in December. He was due to come down after his, whirlwind start, but with the bright lights on, I don't want to go away from him necessarily. I think I want a veteran alternative to him in terms of these games, and a kind of sneaky development here on this trip, and how much you want to put in Al Horford's absence in this equation is curious to me. But in their on the road trip, they were 27th in the NBA in offensive rating. So the offense is kind of crashing back to earth a little bit. On the flip side, the defense was top 5 in the trip. So it's like, whether this is how much you read into this, we'll find out when we get through this homestand to see where they actually stand on this front. But I don't know, when you see Hauser and Cornette and Blake Griffin, when you play him, you try to play him 3 games in a row, he's kind of. This is no surprise in terms of what these guys are. But to me, the fascinating question still is like, do you get the extra insurance big? Versus do you go after a wing with, like, if you do make a trade on either of those fronts, that's not in the buyout market. And I'm leaning more towards like try to find that, veteran wing that isn't going to be, you don't want to have to play, but at least gives you an alternative to something if like Hauser's confidence is shot.
So I guess what will your balance be? Because I guess when my sort of start of the season checklist about what I thought maybe Brad Stevens could pursue would be a defensive minded wing, someone who just, even if his offense is streaky, you feel comfortable putting him out there and spelling Jason and Jalen for 5 extra minutes a game, or, but a body that you would be comfortable putting out there who could defend in a playoff series. Like, that would be sort of my benchmark for what I'm looking for. And then you have Hauser, and maybe he figures it out, and maybe he's just like better in those spots. And then you've got this guy who is either played a bunch of playoff games or at least knows the magnitude of the moments. I keep having people say, "Oh, go get Jay Crowder." Like, we know that's not feasible. So, set your bar a little bit lower and just give me someone who can defend for 5 minutes and take on Andrew Wiggins or whatever the case may be, and take some of the pressure off the Jays. And I think that's fine that would be fine if they could find that guy. But that guy also has to understand he's just not going to play a lot.
Right. And that's a challenge there, to like you having to have that kind of buy-in.
Let's take a quick break here. Hear from our sponsor, LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why I have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, since LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I know personally, I've been on LinkedIn for years. It's been a great resource for me to both network and find about job opportunities as a young aspiring journalist. And that's something for you. If you're recruiting, you can use LinkedIn Jobs for very easily. It's very easy to make a post. You add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. And it's simple tools like screening questions make it really easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. So with the year coming to an end here in the next couple of weeks, it's really important to finish the year strong, and you can do that by finding the right team member on LinkedIn Jobs, which is the number one overall in delivering quality hires versus other leading competitors on the market. So LinkedIn Jobs helps you find those qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/winning. That's linkedin.com/winning to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
But yeah, I think you're not gonna get a wing that's an upgrade on what Hauser can do when he's at close to his best. So it is. Sure. I think like you flip it the other way, be like, okay, in the playoffs, if someone gets hurt or like someone gets into early foul trouble and we just need 5 minutes for someone to just grind it out, as you mentioned defensively, like who can we kind of get that fits that bill, and we'll see if that name develops in the next month or two. That's going to take real assets to get even a guy like that that you might even consider playing, right, given how tough it is to get anyone on the market within a reasonable price range. But to me, that maybe sticks out more in terms of someone who could realistically play, as opposed to being like, okay, if one or Al or Robb are out in the postseason series, like the Cornet's a place where you're not going to get any big that can really play against these teams regardless, like a Warriors type squad. Like those guys are always going to be in trouble there. So you're probably better off getting someone who's a little more versatile.
And you're probably better off figuring out what internally you do in that instance. Like Blake is great. Like we said, one is every 7 days, second night of a back-to-back when you just need him to fill minutes. But, are you going small? Are you throwing Grant out there? Like, is that a survivable lineup against a playoff caliber team? And I don't know how you simulate that short of, not having those guys on the second night of a back-to-back against Miami or something like that. But yeah, I'd like to feel better about that. And yet, I got to see it. I want to see what happens when you got Al, you got Robb. Like what it just might be too much of a squeeze to justify using any sort of asset.
You brought him up. Where's your Robb meter at? Have you gotten the text yet? I feel like you're at the first notification.
If you're listening on the audio version, you don't see me grabbing my Robert Williams bobblehead as I try to will him back. Here, let's put him in the picture. So I will tell you the best part of the trip was the excitement on that stupid practice in San Francisco, which I allowed myself to irrationally get excited for. And part of it was like Robb comes over, we walk in, he's just standing there, and you can tell he's talking to the media relations people. So he's going to he's gone through some portion of practice, like the likelihood that he's going to get upgraded to at least something doubtful, questionable, whatever. He comes over, he can't stop smiling. Like, Robb smiles a lot, but this was egregious. And then Mazzulla comes over and he can't wipe the ass-eating grin off his face. So it's just clear that something is bubbling here. And then Robb starts going through 3-on-3 work, and you're like, doesn't quite look like ready. And I mean, I'm irrational. I'm like, whatever, throw him out there. It's only 10 minutes.
That brace he has is massive.
It is. But you know what? I asked him, I said, like, is it cumbersome? And it's got some flex to it. It's not as like egregious as it looks, but clearly they're being very careful with this situation. And I just think they got to the point where it was like, he's not ready for this one. He's not going to play in a back-to-back. You're not going to throw him out there against AD. Yeah. So I think they just decided to get the extra week. I would be, and like, I'm going to totally jinx this because as we record this on Thursday afternoon, we haven't got the injury report, but there's no practice today, which we were actually hoping for. So we could get a better idea of what's going on. But I would suspect the upgrade will start this weekend. Like, I don't know if it'll be doubtful, if it'll be questionable. But I feel like Friday, I've said all along, I thought it was going to be 12-16 and just made sense about like, I didn't know for sure he'd go out on the trip and ramp himself up, but I just felt like with a couple days before, that would be sort of the, let's see where he's at and flip the switch. So I'm hoping for Friday. And I don't know if he plays, it's going to be 10 minutes. It's not going to be a lot. It's just going to probably be, I don't even think some people have said, do you bring him off the bench? I don't know. Like, I think it's better to just throw him in there. The starters were so good last year. Let's just see it. Let's see how it works. And, he's going to be protected in that instance. Doesn't have to do a whole lot. Let's see where it goes. And if he plays Friday and you want to give him Sunday off, do it. Just, you have the luxury here of really sort of ramping him up on your schedule. But I don't see why, if his wind, which was probably the biggest issue that I saw out there, and just kind of like comfort with landing and just, little stuff, turn him loose. Let's get this thing going. Let me have my Time Lord fun.
I do feel like the Magic is the perfect opponent for him.
Right.
They have like 100 bigs. So it's like, all right, that's, you're not going to have to like work too hard in switches and stuff.
Yeah. Go guard Mo Bamba for a few minutes. Like, I'm not worried about that. And honestly, I just want to see it. And I think just having his presence is going to, first off, it's going to give you a necessary sort of momentum jolt, which sounds weird, but the part of the trip, and especially that Clippers game, it felt like sometimes the Celtics were so good at the start of the year that they maybe needed a little extra motivation. Now they were way too hyped for Golden State, but I think they just showed up for that Clippers game and sort of said, all right, we're going to bounce back. We're going to do this. And then the game came at them a little quicker than they expected, and Kawhi was much better. So I think sometimes you just need a little extra carrot. And I wonder if Robb, like seeing Robb back out there, that doesn't energize you. And I don't know if you need that against the Magic, but it's still going to help. And
we need it against the Magic. We need him, that storyline. Yeah,
for sure. Like, because what the hell else are we going to write about for these games? But no, I just think in general, really, really, the one thing that I will remind myself as I obsess about like the minutia of the trip is they're coming back. What are they? 22
and 7.
22 and 7. And they got a 7-game homestand. So there's a chance legitimate, like let's say they go 6-1, 33 and 8, like at the halfway point. It's pretty damn good. Nice little 66 win pace for you there. And you get to ramp up Robb. Like there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about where this thing could go. And also like there's another measuring stick game. All right, you crapped your pants against Golden State. Didn't make us feel great about this team. Here comes Milwaukee. What do you got? And, don't try to read too much into one game, but we'll read a ton into one game in that instance. And we'll know more about this team as we emerge from Christmas.
Well, they're due for a good Christmas starting.
Santa, just bring me Robb, please.
Because his agent openly said, like, we expect him back by Christmas. So if his agent is saying that publicly to the likes of Woj, and like, you have to think that this is the week, and you're not going to debut him on Christmas against Giannis.
No.
You're going to see, and even before that, like Gobert, they played the Wolves on the 23rd.
Oh, that's right.
So
I wouldn't worry about putting him out there against Gobert.
That's true. I mean, Gobert, that's a 500 team, right? I mean, that's a whole nother.
Most over. You want to talk about two teams? The Magic and the Wolves. We're playing all the teams that have 94 bigs. Like you're going to need Robb out there. So hopefully, just turn him loose. Let him do Robb things.
It is, and so that will be to see how. And I think that's important for the team now too, from the perspective of once you do get him back, you can get the full perspective of what does this team look like with Robb this year? Where does he fit in best in terms of how we want to maneuver rotation minutes over the course of the game? How much do you want to play him and Al together? Is that your closing lineup, or are you better off going small? Like a lot of that stuff is going to depend on the opponent, but the sooner Mazzulla gets into that, the better it is to plan things out.
And I would say, like, if you're Brad Stevens, if you're gonna make a move, like, do your work early. And I don't know if you can, right? Like, if you're gonna bring someone in, now I'm talking myself right out of it. It's like no one they bring in on January 15th is gonna change the ceiling for me. And maybe you just sit there and be idle. And I'm sorry if anyone's out there is really hoping they're going to use this Juancho Bo Cruz TPE. I just don't really see it happening unless there's some way to package Gallo, and I just don't see it. So I would say buckle up and hope the buyout scrap heap is particularly robust because of the Wembanyama sweepstakes.
Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know, like, Juancho might be available. You just trade for Juancho back.
Oh,
he's probably going to be a scrap heap.
The Juancho TP.
Use the Juancho on himself.
Who would be the one Celtic player from like recent years that you'd want to reacquire for this team. Like
you're playing them Friday, bowl.
Oh, I mean, that's a fun one. Does that bother you that they just sort of moved on?
No, I mean, they got out of the trade. They had to get out of luxury tax. So like, I think that was a move that like you're going to stay in a luxury tax for bowl. Like, come on, like let's. But at the same time, it's also like, well,
yeah, now he's
like it would have been fun to take a flyer on him for that like purposes. But you can't. Given where they are right now, I don't think there's anyone you can really be like, oh my god, they should have.
Yeah,
for sure, Max Strus or whatever, and even him is kind of falling back to earth right now. Who do you have?
But yeah, no, that's the way I look at it too. Every time someone brings up Bol and gets mad about it, I'm like, I mean, I hope people understand how close to the luxury tax they were, and that they were gonna eat it if they won the finals. But even by just getting to the finals and Jalen's escalators, they were right up against it. So you had no room for Bol, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Like if you're looking at the long term vision, like the money saved from not carrying Bol probably outweighed the potential that he was going to be any sort of contributor here. And so that's my justification for the number crunchers and being letting him go. But yeah, I like the one dude I would want to reacquire. I mean, we always joke about Tice because like it just feels like Tice should come back at some point.
Has he played this year?
I don't think so. Didn't they announced at the start of the year that he was going to be like shut down, and that with a great excuse, it was like he is worn out from the German national team, and like they need to ramp him up appropriately. And now they're good, so maybe they should get him going. I need to check those box scores, see what he's up to. Maybe Indy comes to town at some point, right? Like we get a
this week.
That's right. Yes, we'll find out for sure what's going on with Daniel Tice and Aaron Nesmith. That'll be a fun little revisit. I would say, and then is Malik Fitz still on their roster?
I don't know where Malik Fitz is right now.
I feel like he's air guitaring somewhere.
No, he's. I think he must be in the G League overseas. They definitely waived him.
He would be the dude because like if I just need good end of the bench presences right now, and I think Luke Cornett. It was funny, we were doing a 1-on-1 with Luke Cornett in San Francisco, and a lot of people, a lot of guys obviously, reprocessing the emotions of the finals, and a lot of guys were like, oh yeah, Robb said he's pissed and Jalen's upset. Like, there's all this motivation because of what happened against the Warriors. And I asked Luke, I was like, what's it like being back in San Francisco? He's like, I miss Malik Fitz. So I texted him. And I was like, you know what? That's such a human thing. Like those guys, that end of the bench group, they kind of traveled everywhere together and were just part of the run. And they knew they weren't playing. Ime wasn't going past 8 on any given night. So he said they had a big text thread going of all the former end of the bench guys. Like, I don't know if Stauskas was on there or not, but
wow.
It's what a little throwback for those guys who got to be part of the ride.
Yeah, it's like probably like a bullpen in baseball. Like when you're in a long relief, you play once every 2 or 3 weeks in the playoffs when you're in a game that is decided, but it's a lot of downtime. And those guys spent a lot of downtime together. But they played a lot of 3-on-3 in practices and stuff like that. So shout out to those guys. Look, you got to be ready. You never know. But I think spots 8 through 12 can feel a little bit more confident about maybe seeing the floor at times in the Missoula era. I have found Malik Fitz. He is with the Ontario Clippers.
All right.
All right. So he is.
I'm all in. If I had known that, I probably would have lobbied harder to go to LA and try to sneak in a game with because at first I thought you were going to say like Ontario Stampede or something of like some Canadian basketball league, but better that he's in the G League.
No, it's that was such a fun story to see I hope he's still doing in the G League, but he's probably not on the bench much, you'd think.
Ooh, that's a good point. Maybe just air guitars on the court.
Yeah, absolutely. Just breaks into it. All right, I think that's about it. That's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I got too. I mean, it's weird. We're not used to extra days off during the season because of this game. So
it's been a while.
I would have liked to practice just if Robb was going to be out there, but beggars can't be choosers. We'll get the podcast instead. All right, make sure you are following Chris Forsberg, follow the Celtics Talk Pod and Celtics Post Up. Is that up tonight or what's the word? That was last night.
That was last night. Oh, that was a Wednesday night. I'm sorry.
Thanks for watching.
It's usually Thursday though. I assumed it's. Why are they throwing you guys to Wednesday?
You know,
we had a notification on my
back to back to start the week. We get pushed all over the map. So yeah, but like maybe it's a replay this weekend.
Go find it on YouTube.
It is on YouTube if you want to go watch. There were some good segments.
Yeah, Forsberg's 4. Some good interviews. Always much to watch stuff on there. So again, thanks for hopping on, Chris. Rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Place Pod here, and buckle in for some Bowl, Markelle Fultz and Aaron Neesmith and company coming in next week. So it'll be a fun
big week
at the TD Garden as all those guys, and maybe Robb Williams is back on the floor.